Yeah. Thank you. And actually, I think you can still go to like tonight's tournament if you want, right? You should have enough time. Even this one end at 6. It's 1 hour. That one will start at 7, so it should be fine for you, right?
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm half an hour away from the chess club, though.
Okay, same as me actually. Even from Panorama.
But I can come to the tournament tonight, anyways, because I don't need to play tonight.
Oh, I no, I what I said is, if you want, you can play the tournament. So that's what I'm saying.
Right. You mean the Tuesday night tournament? The
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I looked at the pictures from last week, and 3 boards per table is not something I'm going to be part
okay.
of.
Okay. Yeah, that's too much.
Hopefully the Southern won't have that problem on the weekend.
Yeah, I don't know. Still, there are quite a few. Yeah, and I was thinking probably we should talk to the organizer, move that one to Friday. The Tuesday tournament. Why they put it on Tuesday? It's like,
yeah, they've always played Tuesday. That's sort of what people work their lives around. Okay, now we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10.
8 people.
So you and me plus 8 so far.
Yeah, probably that's okay.
So the one who just came up on video, there we go, Ricky Ma, I got it now.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to try to brush up on my Chinese to pronounce that before his name came up, so.
Yeah, right.
So are we missing anyone that you know from?
Let me see. I can check, but usually it's like this. Around, let me see. Should be 10. Some from yeah, now it's 9. I think it's another one from US. Will show up later, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, guys. If you can, you can turn on your video. That's
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to turn my video on here, and as soon as I find my. Why am I not able to pull up my thing right now? Just give me a second here. There we go. Good evening, everybody. Feel free to put up your video and wave if you want. I'm actually going to ask you guys just for a minute to.
It's not the evening for me.
Sorry, what was that, Luke?
It's not the evening for me. I'm in Canada.
Okay. Anyone who can unmute their mic if they have an opinion one way or the other. I want you guys to tell me if you thought that last week was too hard or just right or too easy. I know we have a few different levels here, but what do you guys think? The kind of level, I like to push you guys a little bit, but I try to go slow so that we don't leave anyone behind it. You guys feel the level was okay?
I think the level was okay to me.
Thank you, Ricky. Anyone else want to? I see Luke, you got thumbs up. That's good. Anyone else? Everybody happy enough with the level? Okay, because we're going to do similar things today. We're going to do a few different kinds of games, and we're going to look at a few themes. We'll probably start, as I usually do, with an end game because, you know, end games are boring. Not always, but we'll get that out of the way first just to warm your brains up, but stuff you should know in the ending. So we'll start there a little bit. Okay, so give me a minute. Let me see what I have here. I'm going to go with a bit of an unusual one. Actually, no, I'm going to go with this one first. So right away, I want you guys to speak up if you guys have seen this study before. Has anyone familiar with it? Okay, I can't see everybody at once here, but okay. Nobody, anyone seen it before? If not, we're gonna go to work on this one right now because there's an important lesson about endings here. So the position you've got in front of you, white, you can tell by the grid on the board, white is going up the board and it's white to move here. And at first sight, it looks like there's no possible way that black is going to be able to catch that pawn that white's going to run away with. So is that makes sense to everybody so far? If white plays pawn to here on the first move, because that's his first move, right? Does everybody, I don't know why we got all the arrows, but we'll come back to that in a minute. I thought I was going to be able to do it on notation. Let me try it on notation because there's no real big secrets to give away here. First of all, the arrows are handy in one way. I want anyone who knows to speak up or to put your hand up and tell me if you know the endgame rule called square of the pawn. It has to do with
I
whether.
know it, but I kind of forgot it.
Okay. Sorry, so what did you say, Luke? You know it, but what?
I kind of forgot it.
Okay. So actually these arrows are kind of handy for us right now. So what it has to do with, sometimes when a pawn is a long ways from promoting, like in this case, it's still 4 squares away. What we need to know as black here is if we count 4 squares to the promotion square and we count 4 squares across, in this case, it would be to the E4 square. In a normal circumstance, this black king would have to be able to enter this square. It would have to get somewhere inside this whole square here to be able to catch the pawn. So sometimes you use that as a quick calculation to figure out whether you can catch a passed pawn or not. You only have to count up to, can I get within this square, if it's my move right now as black, before the pawn advances. And it's pretty clear right now that we can't, right? We're a long ways away from getting anywhere close in here. So let's see the second move, but there's an additional thing going on here, and it has to do with that little passed pawn of our own that we have on F3. And I'll come back to the lesson in this in a minute. This is pretty amazing. So white just runs away with his pawn. The king is still nowhere close enough to get into the square of the pawn. With only 3 squares ahead of the pawn now, if we count 3 to the side, this is the square here now from A5 to D5 to D8 to A8. And the king is still a long ways from getting towards that pawn. So it seems like there's no way he can catch it. But I want you guys to watch what happens. So the king comes to C3 now. We're getting closer to the pawn, but we're not really there yet. And we'll deal with what happens. We'll look at 2 different ways here. What happens if white runs away with the pawn right away? Okay, we have A6. And all of a sudden, we're getting very close to helping our own pawn queen. So if white was going to stop the pawn now, what would he play? If white wants to stop black's pawn from queening now. I'm trying to find a way, type of video where I can see more of you guys all at once. Okay. Anyone got an answer here? White to move.
G3.
Right. King B3, right? Or King G3, sorry. And I want you to watch, a funny thing happens here now. After King E2, we're controlling all the squares down to getting a queen. And suddenly white can't stop this pawn from queening. So if white tries to queen his own pawn, black's going to be one move later, but it's okay. And if they both get queens, it's just going to be a draw. And white can't do anything to come back and stop it, or he actually would lose in this case because we would queen with check, right? And then we'd run over and grab the other pawn. So let's go back right here, though. This is the important moment. What happens if we just run and grab that pawn now? Keep in mind the square of the pawn. That means 3 squares forward, 3 squares over. The king is still 2 squares away from getting to the square of the pawn. But watch this move. We play king to d4. And actually those arrows are perfect again. They show us the square of the pawn, right? If white's pawn doesn't move now, we're going to be able to enter this square with our king, and we know that the pawn can't queen before we can catch it. So if white plays king takes pawn now, then black just enters the square of the pawn, and we know we're going to pick it up, right? So if we go back here to king d4, what happens if we play a6 now? Our king is still 2 squares away from stopping the pawn, but what we do is we run in to help our pawn again. So king e3, we're ready to advance our pawn. a7, f2, we're almost at the queening square, and just as the king comes back to stop us, we play king e2, and we're going to, again, both sides are going to queen, and it's going to end up being a draw. But if you go back to the original position, it's hard to believe after this move a4 that there's any way that we're going to stay close enough to the pawn. But we make just enough threats against the king on the other side to queen our own pawn that we manage to hold on. And let me explain what that means. If we think of the square as being this area all through here, if I chase the pawn directly, 1, 2, 3, right? The pawn is always too far away from me. But if I want to help this pawn, I can go 1, 2, 3 on a diagonal, right? From A1, B2, C3 to B4. It's still only 3 moves, but I'm taking the pawn in the same time, which means that diagonal moving is just as fast in terms of the number of squares it takes us to reach a certain point on the board. We can reach B4 here in 3 moves from going on a diagonal and then switching, or straight up the board and then over. Does that make sense, guys? So in this case, we get to combine chasing the pawn just as quick to get into the square while helping our own pawn just in time to queen, and we end up tying the game. That makes sense to everybody? Any questions? I got to see what I did to my thing here because I only see some of you again. Okay, Max, let's try you right now. Can you unmute for a sec?
Yeah.
Okay, is there any part of that you didn't understand that you want to see again?
No.
Kind of amazing, isn't it? Because in the original position, you'd never believe it was possible to catch that pawn, right?
Yeah.
That's a famous study by a guy named Richard Reddy. He was one of the better players in the 1920s, 1930s, almost 100 years ago. He wrote a couple of famous books called Masters of the Chessboard, which you can still buy in modern form. And also, what was the other one? Modern ideas in chess. So that was modern ideas for that time period, for 90 years ago. He was what was known as one of the hyper modern players, which meant they were the players that started playing openings. If you think about, if any of you have played anything like the King's Indian defense or the Grunfeld, the Benoni, these are openings that don't try to keep an equal part of the center. They fight against the center from the sides. Those are called hypermodern openings, and that's where this term came from. So I'm going to stop that share for a second. Again, everybody happy with what you saw there? No questions? Okay, that's the only end game I'm going to do so far, unless we have time later. I'm going to move on to a couple of other things then. I want to talk about when we have enough power to attack the opponent's king, when it makes sense to sacrifice and when it doesn't. So I'm going to show you an opening from a game. Any of you guys that are crossovers from the Calgary Junior Chess Club will probably know Tamir Bolga, because he coached some of the cases, or some of the classes, sorry. So this is just a game between us that that was a blitz game one night, a 3-2 time limit, I believe. So, okay, so I'm just gonna run through quickly. I don't know why my arrows don't work on this, but we'll try anyways. So I had the white pieces. I don't play this opening with E3. I don't play this in tournament games. This is more of an internet one for me. So I'm already aiming this bishop where I think black is likely to castle. So black correctly fights back against the center. And I play to hold the center solid. So can anyone here tell me if you're familiar with the London system as white, or does anyone play it?
I've heard it before, but I forgot a little of it. I think most of it.
Okay, who was that I was just talking to? Sorry. Was that Ricky? No. Sorry, I can't see you guys all at once. Who answered?
Me,
Oh, was that Brighton?
Ricky.
Ricky, okay, cool. So for anyone who's seen the London system before, white would have this exact pawn structure that you see here, like a little triangle in the middle of the board, with the difference that instead of a bishop on D3, he would have his dark square bishop on F4, and that would be the London system. That's actually in tournament, that's a more promising system than what I'm playing here, but this is a bit of, as I say, something I use on the internet. Now, black plays for his share in the middle of the board, right? He'd like to stick a knight in here and come forward. So my next move is aimed against letting his knight come in. So I put a second defender on the E4 square. We'll do the opening quickly, but just to get a few ideas in. Knight C6. Okay, if I do this for a second, can anyone tell me what black would like to play next if white lets him? Anyone got an idea? And it has to do with the move knight c6. What is that going to help support for black? Where would he like to gain more space? Anyone? Okay, somebody other than Ricky. You guys got to speak up for me. Who am I going to get? Kinjal, are you there?
Is
Okay,
it
you want to give this one a
E5?
shot?
Is it E5?
Yes. And why e5? What does that do to help black?
Because if the pawn takes, then knight could take attacking the bishop.
Right. So more space in the middle, right?
Yeah.
And also notice that right now black's bishop on c8 is kind of blocked in. And if he can get the move e5, then not only is this dark square bishop got space, but this light square bishop gets more space too. So it just makes sense that he would try for space in the middle of the board. Okay. So now my next move is aimed against allowing the e5 break. So I'm playing this sort of what they call a cat and mouse game, where I'm waiting for what my opponent wants to try to do, and then I'm just trying to prevent it. So he plays bishop to e7, trying to castle. Now, queen to e2 looks kind of odd. Would you agree? It doesn't seem to do very much. But there's a reason I'm doing this, and I'll show you guys. If I don't play queen e2, if I play knight to here first, which looks like a very natural move, if you were on the black side, you could look for undefended squares, and you could notice that that square on e3 is undefended. All of a sudden, you can play knight to g4, attacking it. And when I play queen e2 now, you can play f5 and close up the center. So you're not going to give white any chance to break open with e4 or any other move. So this move, queen e2 in this position, is aimed at stopping that knight from coming to g4 and then playing my knight out the next move. Okay, so Tamir, he's actually quite a good player. Normally he's stronger than I am, but we all have off nights. He plays queen to c7. Now, let me ask you a question. If it were black's move now and he took white's d4 pawn in the center, how would white normally want to take back? Which pawn would I take with, the e pawn or the c pawn? Johnny? You want to try this one? Oh, Nathan, you raised your hand. Thank you. You guys can unmute when you want to answer. So Nathan, go ahead.
E pawn, because if you take the e pawn, then the queen can come back and take your f pawn.
Right. But let's just say normally, let's put that aside for a moment. In a normal situation, which way would you prefer to take? After c takes d4, would you prefer to take with the e pawn or the c pawn?
The c pawn.
Okay, so let's just see what would happen if we did. If we allowed him to take in the middle, I'll actually show you the next move, and then we'll do this trade. After c takes d4, if I were to take with the c pawn, do you guys see the problem with this move now for white? By allowing the knight in, we're putting pressure on white's nice white square bishop, but we're also threatening to come into this square and fork the king and rook if he's not careful. So white would hate to give up that nice bishop. So what I've done here is, after queen c7, I could play knight h3, defending my f pawn this way, so I could still take back in the center with the e pawn. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to lure the queen forward. And sorry, someone had their hand up. Was there a question before I go to the next part of the game? Feel free to unmute and just call out your question. Evan, anything?
No.
Okay. Luke?
No.
All right. So I could play knight h3 so that I can answer pawn takes pawn and take with the e pawn, and I'm keeping the f pawn defended. But it's not a very active square, is it, over on the corner of the board? So what I'm doing is I'm deciding that I'm going to give him the f pawn, but I'm going to try to open up all my lines. And I want you guys to look at this position for a second and imagine how white looks a little bit cramped in. His bishop is stuck on c1. There's a pawn on e3 getting in the way of my development. And then I want you to watch how quickly it changes when I give up a pawn. So this is a case where we're giving up a pawn on purpose, but we're trying to gain certain things. So I make a normal developing move, knight g to f3, c takes d4, and now e takes d4. So I'm not letting that knight into this b4 square. I am offering the f pawn, but already this bishop on c1 that was kind of sad has already gained one more square to come to on e3. And if black plays queen takes f4, which she did in the game, suddenly both bishops have nice long diagonals. You can see that, right? And they're side by side pointing down the board. So compare that for a second to this position. And you see how much more active white's game has just become, because now I'm going to be able to move the knight on d2, attacking the queen. And what square do you think I'm going after for my knight? Like, what's the best square to put this knight on? I could put it on e4. Evan, go ahead.
Maybe 5.
Would be e5?
Yeah.
And
For
to
the
get there, I'd
D2
have to go through c4, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I could go somewhere like e4, but the question is, after knight e4, queen c7, it's not so clear now where this knight should go, is it? Now it's under attack and it has to move. I might trade here, but I'm not doing much. So c4 is a much more active square. And I should mention one other piece that just got a lot better. In a few moves now, when I castle, I want you to notice with the f pawn gone, that the rook that'll end up on f1 will have a nice attacking line as well into the game. All this for one pawn, right? Not bad. So queen c7, because the queen was under attack from this bishop. And now our knight that's under attack comes into e5. So now we have two beautiful bishops. We have control of the e5 square. And we have an open F file to start attacking on. I mean, just look at the pieces. They're all pointed at the king side. My knight up on e5 is in the middle of black's position. My two bishops are pointing at the king side. So if black wants to castle there, it's going to be very risky. Evan, did you have a question? I just see your mic open there.
It's just, you probably saw something.
Yeah. So this is a lot for one pawn, isn't it? Black is still not developed. White's pieces are all very well placed, and all we gave up was one pawn. We do have a big threat here of bishop check, putting more pressure on this square with the knight and the bishop together, and it gets really hard for black. So black plays bishop to d7 to keep my bishop out of there. I just keep developing, right? I castle. And remember what we said, by giving up the f pawn, even this rook is a great piece now. It can come forward attacking here, or it can come this far and start attacking across the third rank here. So black also castles, and here I think we saw this in one game last week, and we had a name for this. I think we looked at one game where we had what's called a rook lift, right?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Okay, so that's the idea here too. Black's kind of made a mess of this, I'm afraid. It's unfortunate, but it happens to all of us. I mean, Tamir lost this game to me, but he's beat me before as well. So it happens to all of us. Okay. So all our pieces are pointing at the king side. We don't care if he trades on e5. Mainly that knight is there to block black's pieces up. So we just aim at the next open spot, the soft spot in black's position. So we gave an example here in one other lecture that I did on this game. we gave an example. We gave black what we'll call a made up move, like a6, just so we can show this. Anyone here heard the term classic bishop sacrifice? You might have heard it under another term, but these sacrifices against the pawn on h7 with the light square bishop are so common that they use the word classic for it. And here's an example. We just gave black a move to play like a6. And I want you guys to watch what can happen now. So bishop h7, knight h7, queen h5. Well, there's two checkmating squares if that knight moves away. If the knight moves away, there's a checkmating square on h8. And if the knight doesn't move away, there's a checkmating square on h7, right? Everybody good with that?
What if the f8 rook moves to e8?
Okay, so actually in the line that we tried last time, we put it on d8 to give the king more room to run. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit training. So sorry, who was answering that? Because I'm going to have you answer another question for me.
Hello.
Evan, right? Okay.
Yeah.
You feel like you'd want to play queen h7 here, but then the king kind of runs away a bit. Can you find a quicker win here, Evan? Do you want to try something else here instead of queen takes h7?
Queen takes f7.
Okay, and then king h8. And now what?
Knight g6.
Is checkmate, right?
Yeah.
Everybody see that? So we go queen f7. King h8. Knight g6 checkmate. So in a position like this, if we go back a few moves here, sometimes when we see a good move, we should look for a better move. We can end the game right away with queen f7 and then checkmate in another move, okay? So let's go back to notation for a minute. Now, queen h7 should win in the long run, but it just takes a lot longer. So our way is faster, right? So after rook h3, Tamir is a good enough player to know that he can't let my bishop into h7 because he knows that that bishop sacrifice idea is going to be really powerful. And these lines work best when we have things blocking black from getting his pieces back in a game, like my knight on e5. It's in the middle of the board and it just blocks all of black's pieces. Notice that there's not very good protection from these pieces coming across this way. The knight is the only thing holding it together for black. So Tamir plays knight e4 to block my bishop off. He's got to give up a pawn, but keep in mind that he was up a pawn to start with. So bishop takes e4, d takes e4, queen takes e4. And we'll go back to training for a second. Okay. What's our threat now after queen takes e4? Who haven't we heard from for a bit? Okay, Ricky. Okay, it's been a little while, Ricky, but we'll get some other people in here too. Go ahead, Ricky.
Is it checkmate on h7?
Very good. Sorry, Luke, I just saw your hand, so I'll get you to answer the next question as well. So,
Okay.
so I'm just going to go back to the game position. Actually, notation. So that is let's go with the main line. G6 would be one way to try to hold this game together. But we would probably just play Queen H5 and just keep attacking. There's a lot of ways to win here. You notice that these dark squares are very, very weak for black if black has to play G6, right? We may get some combination of getting our bishop into H6 and our queen into F6. And then checkmates coming there. There's a lot of big problems here for black. So he played F5. And Luke, I said I would ask you the next question, right?
Yeah.
We want to keep our attack going. We don't want to slow down, right? So Luke, how about suggesting the next move for white?
Maybe Queen F8. Wait. H4.
Queen which square?
H4.
Okay, very good.
Second. Well,
All righty. Threatening checkmate again, guys. And already you can see that we still have all our pieces pointing at that king, and it's getting harder and harder. Okay, someone else who hasn't answered. Kinjal, you want to try this one? After H6? Nathan, Evan. Nathan or Evan, you got a chance to answer before I go back to Ricky or Kinjal. Brighton.
Can you do
Maybe
another
bishop.
bishop sack?
Yeah, bishop takes H6.
Okay. Why is this going to work, guys? Tell me what's wrong with black's position.
Nothing is really protecting him, I guess.
That's right. There's just no time to get protectors over to the king side, right? If you were to imagine, for example, that black had his bishop on E8 instead of D7, well, maybe this queen could at least offer a little bit of help there, right? But these pieces are all bungled up. They're just not able to do very much to help here. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm saying, when does it make sense to sacrifice? It makes sense to sacrifice when we have a lot more pieces in the attack, and it's pretty obvious that the king's not going to be able to run away easily. Right now, as long as every move is an attack and black can't stop to take the knight, then the king's one running square here on F7 is not available, right? So with that in mind, we probably don't even have to calculate to know that bishop H6 has got to be good, all right? We probably don't even need to calculate. So we'll just take the next position, and I'd like to get this position and get somebody who hasn't answered for a while. Let's see, who do we got? Johnny Zhang, love to hear from you. Do you want to suggest how white can improve the attack here? Go ahead.
Queen take H6.
Okay. With two different checkmate threats, right?
Yes.
And actually, that's probably going to be as good as any. I'm just trying to look here to see if Queen H6, Rook F7, that one is checkmate. Actually, your idea is probably as good as what I was going to suggest. So I had another winning line, Johnny, but yours looks really good. So let's just check it out. Let's put it on the board here. I'm going to do this first so I can pull up a new line. That's the line we'll look at afterwards, but let's put Queen H6 and see if there's any way at all that black can defend this position. The king still can't get to F7, so there's all these checkmates coming. So bishop takes e5 would stop one checkmate, but then it doesn't stop the other one. Does everyone see that? So if bishop takes e5, trying to give the king space, then queen h7 is checkmate. If nothing takes the knight, then rook here is checkmate, or queen here, or queen here. So yeah, this one is quite good as well. It's not the one I had, Johnny, but it's maybe even faster than the one I had. So good job, good job. Can everyone see that there's just no way this king's going to escape? There's too many checkmates coming. Anyone got a magic idea to save black? Other than tip the board over when white's not looking? That'd be bad sportsmanship, right? So we won't do that. Okay, so let's go back here. We'll just do one more. As I say, I think Johnny's way is great, but we'll just look at one more just for completeness here. The other way that we looked at was rook g3 check. And the king can't go to h8, or this queen on h6 is checkmate. So the king would go to h7. Now, I want you guys to look at the squares that it'll be easy to checkmate the king on and that are hard to protect for black. And who can tell me, someone who didn't answer? Let me see, who can we get? Brighton, we haven't heard from you all day, I think. Do you want to try this one? Next move for white? Look for the weak squares around the king and come up with white's next move.
Okay.
A little louder, please.
Yeah. Rook h3.
Yeah, except then maybe rook f6, right?
Rook h3.
Right, so if you go rook h3, then rook h6 might hold on, right? Can you see that? So let's look for a better version than rook h3. Is there a better square for that rook? Same idea, but better square.
Rook g6.
There you go. Perfect, right? That doesn't allow the rook f6 defense. And then our rook is defended by our knight, and queen h6 is going to be checkmate next. Again, this bishop is a problem. It's in the way. Otherwise, black could get the queen across and try to defend, but this bishop is just blocking everything up on d7. Thank you, Brighton. So if we go back to, let's see. So again, as I mentioned, Tamir has messed this game up, but he's a good player, so he knows how to fight back. So he knows he really can't take that bishop, so he takes in the middle instead. Trying to protect the g7 square. So I take his bishop, just reintroducing all those threats. And queen takes e5. So can everybody see that bishop takes g7? Let's do this as a new variation. Bishop takes g7, queen takes g7. Black no longer gets checkmated, but white would at least have this move. And in the long run, white should still win, but it's not simple. White will have a queen for a rook and a bishop, which is a slight material advantage, but not huge, right? Everybody good with that? Okay, I'm just looking at the chat now. I've mainly been watching for you guys raising hands, but I'll check the chat once in a while too. So after queen e5, I could play bishop g7. And on the other hand, I got to make sure the king wouldn't escape, though. That's a little bit complicated. I'm not so sure about that one. It's even possible that king g7. No, I doubt it. I can't imagine a king escaping there. Actually, I think I see checkmate in 3. Anyone want to try? Okay, here, let's do it this way. Anyone want to try the checkmate from here? See how close you can get?
Sure, I guess.
Sorry, so go ahead, Evan. That was you, right, Evan? Go ahead with your solution.
Queen g5.
Okay,
King.
king f7, light square, right?
Yeah, and rook h7.
Right, and if king to e8, the light square, what's the next move?
Queen e7 checkmate.
Very good. And otherwise, the queen can't block on g7 because it leads to checkmate anyways, right? Nicely done. There's also another one, which is queen h7 check, force the king up to f6. It's probably going to take longer, though. Queen h7, king f6, rook h6 check. The king gets out on g5 temporarily, and I don't think he lives very long, but he might survive that longer. I like your solution, Evan. It's very good. So we've convinced ourselves, right, that taking the bishop on h6 just wasn't possible. So what do? I want to keep my attack going down the line, and sometimes to keep an attack going, you need to move backwards. So bishop f4 gains time hitting black's queen, and it sets up all those check squares again here, right? On h7 and h8, depending what we want to do. So sometimes a backwards move is what you need to get out of the way of your own attack. So he plays queen f6, queen h7 check, king f7. And now, keep in mind, this is a 3-2 blitz game. It's not a slow time limit game. And now I couldn't find the easy win. If I play rook to g3, trying to put more pressure here, all of a sudden there's rook h8, and my queen doesn't get out. Well, she gets out, but yeah, no, she doesn't get out. It's not very good, right? However, what I missed in this position, sometimes you have to keep changing your thinking. So after king f7, this pawn is pinned now. And I also have a bishop on this square. So this move would have been a killer. And you can see I'm getting, you know, where's the queen going to go? If she goes to e7, then I'm going to play something like bishop to e5 and just keep piling up on that weak square there. So if he tries to counterattack, then I check, he checks, bishop check, king here. Oh, why did we play bishop check? We played bishop check here because otherwise our queen's not getting out. So bishop e5 check to give our queen a square. And now our queen gets out. And it's that same endgame we talked about before. Queen versus rook and bishop, which is enough to win, but it's going to take some time for sure. So let's just see a few more moves here. And then I want to move on to the next game. But the idea we were after in this game was sorry, the idea in this game we were after was when we have more pieces attacking a king than are defending it, then it's very likely that a sacrifice is going to work. And you guys can all see how that played out there, right? Okay, so let me see what other shares I got here. I want to do one more thing for sure. Here, let me see here. We did that, we did that. Okay, we're gonna do one quickly here. What do we have left? About 10 minutes left. This is one I was showing to Jonathan Wu's dad on Tuesday last week after our lesson. We were talking about some of the material we had. Can you guys tell me, after black played C takes D4, can you guys tell me what this has in common with the last
we
position
can't
we
see
looked
the
at?
screen. We only see the last game.
Say that again, Luke?
We can only see like the like last game, like.
Your screen is it's still showing the
Oh,
last game.
my bad. Sorry about that. I've said it before, old people in technology sometimes doesn't go that well, so. Okay. Give me a thumbs up. You can see it now? Okay.
Yes.
What do you guys see in common with the last position for the white side here? A couple of things. Someone want to pipe up with whether white should have a successful attack here? Okay, let's talk about the bishops first. You remember last game we had our bishops facing this way, and we were able to actually sacrifice the dark square one on h6, right? Well, we have the same thing going here again. The only thing really holding black's king side together is this bishop right here. Okay, on g7. This knight is out of play, and in this case, it's a pawn, not a bishop on d7 like last time, but it's this pawn is blocking off this queen's ability to get back and help. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces in the attack, and only one defender over here for the king. So you know something's got to go wrong. The solution on this one is really funny, guys, but we'll just see what everyone has to say for this one. Okay. No, nothing new in the messages, right? Anyone want to unmute to answer this one?
I put some things in chat.
Okay, let me look again. I thought I saw chat for a minute and then I didn't see again. Just says that you think it wins and I see C2 takes G6. Okay, let's have a look. I can see it now. Thank you. So let's give this a try. Okay. Definitely a good idea, right? So let's start with what you were saying first, with the obvious, what happens if he takes it and queen takes. And we're going to stop here for a minute. And Evan, why don't you continue your thought pattern here and try to come up with something? Okay, so rook to g8, right? I'm just going to pull the chat over to the side so I can. Okay, I'm going to leave the rook back here for a second because I want somebody.
Excuse me, the rook was originally on d8, not e8.
Was it? Okay, I had to guess there, so. This is going to mess stuff up, but that's fine. Anyways, can someone tell me right away why rook to g8 doesn't work? Nathan or someone else? Want to try it?
Because the queen can just take the bishop.
Okay, so after this
Yep.
move, though, after rook to g8 defending the bishop, what's the winning move for white? Anyone want to try?
I know. Maybe
Go ahead.
bishop h6.
That's a really good idea, and it's going to be very similar to the game. Turns out there's a faster one, but you're on the right track for what happened in the actual game. So bishop h6 is a really cool idea because it puts 3 times pressure on here. And if this bishop were to move, then we'd have queen h7 mate. But then we have a much simpler one too. So that was, let me get back to my, yeah. Can everybody see though that as black surrounds his king with pieces, that this is the fast one right here? So queen h5 check. Then you have to block with the bishop, then queen takes bishop as checkmate. Right? Everybody good with that? So Nathan is on the right track. There's I guess I'll call it a cooler way to do it, but Nathan's got the right idea with what's happening with the tactics here. I went about this a slightly different way because in a way it's more unexpected. We already know from what we just saw that, for example, if we could get our queen into the square, into g6, then the bishop and the queen would be very powerful attacking the king. But the problem is that h7 pawn is still there. And the only thing that can attack the rook or the h7 pawn is the rook from f7, but the bishop's in the way. So what could we do about the bishop? Any ideas? Our own bishop is under attack on e3. Does that explanation give you guys an idea? Very nice, Max. Thank you. That would be hard to come up with, though, just off the top of your head. It helps to have a few hints, right? But it's this move. It's bishop h6, and you guys are going to see the way I put my own annotations into games. Kapow! It's like walking into a wall and suddenly you hit your head on the wall. And now if bishop takes bishop, we get back to what we talked about, getting our queen to the square. We have rook check. Forces king. Queen check. Now that the G pawn is no longer defended, king h8. And queen mate. And the amazing thing about this is in the game, when I played bishop h6, my opponent, who was rated 2050, an expert level player, actually played bishop takes bishop without even thinking, which is amazing because he should have known that I was up to something. So it turns out that the only defense is rook to g8, but this just kind of leads us back to a different move order of the other line. And now we can play bishop g6. There's no bishop takes h6 because there's an X-ray from here to h7 where rook takes h7 would be checkmate. Everybody see that? And after pawn takes, queen takes, we actually get the position we looked at in the last line, but just through a different order of moves. And there's no way that black can defend all this. But the main thing I wanted to make the point here, guys, came down to that idea that when you have superior attacking forces, very often you'll find that sacrifice in the position that'll blow it open because it's hard for the other guy to get back and defend. In this case, that e7 pawn is a real problem because the queen can't get over and help, just like in the last game. That all makes sense to everybody? Any questions? And I don't really have time to start something new here, so I think we are going to, I'm just having a look at what I got here. I really doubt that I'd have time to start something new. No, anything that I would start now would take too long. And you guys are starting your tournament in about 1 minute. So I'm going to let you go, and I want you guys to think about that in your games. Like in that first game that I showed you of mine, I actually gave up a pawn to get all those pieces pointing at the king side. And then even though my opponent was quite a good player, he kind of fell apart. So that's something you can use in your own games. And I believe you guys have a tournament to go to now. Does everyone's been here. You guys all know how to get to your tournament, right? Sean, are they ready to roll?
Yes, they are expert. They know how to do that.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. See everybody next week.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.